Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Fluffenbusters. My name is Adam White. I hope you're doing well. Now, for those of you new to the channel, just know that we like to keep each episode fresh. We like to keep each show a little different. We like to mix it up. For instance, our last recording was Mortal Kombat with the lovely Arcadia Wild Bill. Now, in that show, we talked about a film that started as a series of unfinished, rewritten scripts due to all the writers involved. We talked about a project that was turned down by two very, very egotistical action stars. A project that lost its lead actress at the very start of filming and had to rush a replacement in. Gosh. And then, of course, there was a set that encouraged improv and jokes to somehow patch up scenes, and a shoot that ran wildly over time and budget, all due to the helming of an inexperienced director. And yet somehow that film became a fondly remembered classic. Well, we won't make that mistake again, will we? Oh no, because today we're looking at 1993's Demolition Man, a film that started as a series of unfinished scripts due to multiple rewrites in different genres. A project that was turned down not just by two egotistical action stars, but the same two egotistical action stars. A project, you'll be pleased to know, that didn't lose their lead actress at the start of filming. Oh no. She had 2 days of filming first and then they lost her. It was a set that encouraged improv and jokes to patch up the scenes, but in this case, it led to some clashes. And yes, it was a shoot that also ran wildly over time and budget. And yet, in the same way, this has become a fondly remembered classic. And so, as we start a film that is absolutely nothing like the previous film we recorded, I am joined by the lovely Big D. How are you doing, sir?
Hey man, I am doing fine this evening, and wow,
We have a type.
it seems we do. I mean, I did remember some of the issues with Demolition Man over the years from when it was being made, but I hadn't realised there were that many problems.
There are so many scenes and plots and elements cut from this film. It's a perfect distillation of how Hollywood often works. It chucks together ideas and sees if it'll all gel at the end of the day. And sometimes you get lucky,
Yeah,
and sometimes you don't. This shares so much DNA with not just Judge Dredd, but also Alien 3 and Johnny Mnemonic. There are films that failed or collapsed, and then there are films that somehow made it through. And a lot of this film is actually due to one element, which was the element hired at the very last minute.
I was just going to add to that. The 90s is an especially interesting period for action cinema because
Mm,
you would have the extravagant opulence of the 80s action films. Cannon had been and gone. The Golan brothers had met their makers. And we were into the era, well, we were starting to approach the era of, well, Snipes, Keanu, their ilk, and an influx of more Asian sensibilities,
yep.
which meant that a certain brand of more, shall we say, muscular action figure started to lose their luster over this decade. But they also made those same actors made some very interesting movies.
They did. As they realized that their time at the top was coming to an end, and in many ways, the big guys, Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger, they realized that tastes were changing.
Hmm,
They were investing in films that maybe pushed them into different realms. And it's fascinating to review some of these, but they weren't all winners,
no, not at all.
but they did produce some interesting cinema.
Absolutely. And it shows that they they were all quite willing. Those of them who had finance, and it's easy to forget, but Stallone had a before he made his chops as an action star, he was building a fairly steady career for himself as a writer
Mm,
in scripts. And Arnold, I mean, honestly, he didn't need to do movies. He did them because he wanted to. Because
mm.
that was his plan. He was already a millionaire before he became a film star. He hadn't outside of bodybuilding. He He and a few other buddies had been doing tiling in California, and had turned that into $1 million business because the crafty sods brand themselves as European tilists.
Mm.
They did nothing different. They just all spoke with thick European accents, and that was good enough to sell it to people. But yeah, we should probably get Demolition Man rolling, shouldn't we? Because this is
Yeah.
an absolutely fascinating film.
But before we do that, just going to say to folks out there, if there is another action film from this period that you would like us to talk about, be it Last Action Hero, be it another Sly film, let us know in the comments. It's always good for us to add new movies to the list.
Mm.
Folks, we're going to go from the beginning of the Warner Brothers logo, and I'll count us in by going 3, 2, 1, click. So, you ready, D?
Yep.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, click. Lovely.
Yeah, that lovely classic Warner's logo.
I don't want to start with a dig, but I'm going to have to.
Go on.
The one thing that always gets me about this is I know it's lovely to see the Hollywood sign up in flames, but it's such a wobbly camera. I've never been able to figure out why. It almost looks like it's Thunderbirds. It just seems to be jumping all over the place.
That's a very good point. And oh man, as ever with these films, LA 1996. Ooh.
Well, you could say they were partially right, I suppose.
Well, the sirens, I suppose, but I mean that's applicable to a lot of American states. Ditto all these Hummers decked out in police blues.
Oh, is there not a more 90s element than all the emergency vehicles are Hummers?
Yeah, you know what's funny? I was traveling into town over the weekend to go to cinema.
Mm.
Now I live in the countryside, for want of a better word, and one of the routes we use to get into our main town is quite a small little village full of quite well-to-do folks. You can tell
Mm.
there's a fair bit of cash on display. For the first time ever since I've lived here, but bear in mind, there are crossing points because some of the roads are so tight you can't get
Yeah.
two cars side by side. So a couple of them say you have to give way to the driver coming from one direction or the other. That's at either end of the village. I go through, and at the other end is a goddamn Hummer. I'm
No.
thinking, how the hell is that going to get through some of these roads? Even the ones that can take two vehicles won't be able to fit past that one.
By the way, if this had been a genuine bungee cord, and they got the physics wrong here, Sly would have bounced up, gone straight into the rotors. Instead, it ends up with I think they call it a decelerator, but it does look really, really odd.
Mm.
Now, if you're listening to the soundtrack as well, you're going to hear some horns blazing out. And for a moment, you might think, well, hang on a second, that sounds a little bit familiar. Well, the composer for this film was Elliot Goldenthal, who had just done Alien 3, one of many, many people in this film that actually came from Alien 3. So, regardless of how the film was viewed at that time, which was pretty negatively, it has to be said, the craftsmanship of that film, all the way up to the director, who I believe was at least consulted about this film because he recommended the end director. But a lot of the crew from that, technical crew from that film went into this. However, Elliot naturally didn't take a lot of his cues from Alien 3 into this film because that would be crazy.
Mm.
But he did end up taking an awful lot of his cues from this film into Batman Forever. And there are literally moments where you're like, that's Batman Forever.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Now, fun fact, there isn't on any YouTube fact videos because I love this bit. Sly was into his art at the time. Can you see in the background there's little statues?
Yeah.
Like that's Sly doing that. He wanted Phoenix to have like modern art or classic art around him during these scenes. It's actually the use of this art that came to bite Stallone in the ass because he got sued by somebody, and the result of that made them cut the film in a way that most people don't ever realize. Sorry, I know I'm jumping into facts and stuff, but When you start looking at this film, there's two ways you can go.
Hmm.
You can talk about the story and you can expand on the world they created, which is at one point, it's both amazing but deeply flawed. It makes sense and it's kind of relevant and there's satire, but also it makes no sense whatsoever. And it's fun and it's silly. But also, as well, there's so many weird little facts about how this film came together. And some of the stuff is common knowledge. Most people know about Laurie Petty and Sandra Bullock. But there's other stuff as well that people have no idea about. Even Wesley here. Wesley's hairdo inspired the NBA. Dennis Rodman saw this haircut, went, oh, that's cool, started dyeing his hair. For the next couple of years, NBA basketball matches were full of people dyeing their hair all sorts of colors. And it's all from a hairdo that Wesley himself absolutely detested. It's just genius. It's just all these little things.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, this is a film that I remember it was a bit divisive in terms of reviews. I mean, I think I did see it at the cinema at the end of the day, because I quite liked the look of it, to be fair. Everything about it just seemed like a rollicking good time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do remember it being a bit of a mixed bag in terms of reviews. So to know that it had that impact on someone like Rodman, who in the 90s was quite a cultural presence in the NBA and around it. So that's kind of cool.
And I think it even went full circle because I think he ended up starring in action films himself.
Yeah, he was in a couple of Van Damme movies, I remember. And I think he had a couple of other roles over the years. He's a weird dude, is Dennis Rodman. To put it mildly.
Well,
Fascinating.
we'll have to save that for another one. It's like trying to talk about Steven Seagal. There's hours that we could spend on that.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Here's a little universe bend.
Mm.
This is Steve Gahan. He starred in the Lethal Weapon films.
Yeah, as the captain. Yeah.
Yeah. So just keep that in mind for later on. It's so weird. Again, so many tweaks and weird things. I do like the setup here. It was one of the writers that suggested this, and I don't think he was even credited as a proper writer. But he said, "Look, if you're going to have anything set in the future, and this started out as pure action. This was going to be a pure action movie. It was actually going to be Van Damme versus Seagal, but neither of them wanted to play the bad guy." But the whole deal was that you couldn't have a film set in the future with these sort of characters if you didn't establish what they are today, as in this weird Humvee-filled version of 1996.
Yeah.
Which apparently doesn't have any justice system because there's no way that Stallone gets convicted so easily of this crime.
Yeah, I mean, if you stop and think about it, because I mean, the chopper pilots would have confirmed that they couldn't find any heat signatures other than the goons. So right then, that's your plot basically sabotaged in the first 5 minutes. So if you stop and think about it, it makes no sense. But disengage your brain for a bit, and it's like, oh, okay. But yeah.
By the way, if you ever go to the bin liner section of your supermarket and you don't want the black bin liners, you want the small white bin liners that only go in really, really tiny bins. That is what Sylvester Stallone's costume is made out of here. I have no idea why he's wearing it. It's so weird. It's just the oddest thing. And the craziest thing is they keep it. Like, of all the things, it's like, that makes no sense.
Yeah. It's so odd.
He almost looks like a packet of salt in the old-fashioned crisps.
Yeah. It's a very weird one.
Sylvester Stallone was a man with confidence, let's just say.
Oh yeah.
And one of those things that came along with that was this idea that although he would protest and he would say it was a difficult process, the guy did like getting naked in films quite a lot. Like any excuse to go, look, I'm in shape.
Yeah.
That said, though, he does look genuinely terrified here. It's like there's a moment where he's almost like a lost child.
Yeah, there's genuine acting in play here, which not what you expect from this sort of movie, and from Stallone at this point, to be honest.
Well, Stallone was going through a really odd time. So we might as well say this now. So this was about a year after Stop or My Mum Will Shoot, which
Yeah,
was a period where he just couldn't do anything right. Then, just before this, he had Cliffhanger, which was amazing. However, when I
yeah,
say just before this, he was doing interviews for Cliffhanger wearing his costume from this film because he literally had no time. And he was genuinely trying to strike while the iron was hot. Cliffhanger had been a huge success for him. It had been like a revitalization of him at a time when Schwarzenegger was having his first stumbles. And so for Sly, it became really important. That's why he invested so much in this personally. And you can see as well like the progression of from Cliffhanger, which was luck, it was lightning in a bottle, to this where he had some involvement, some guidance. And then he took that on. And he learned a lot of the wrong lessons from this and moved that into Judge Dredd, and that is why Judge Dredd turned out the way it was. But at this time, he was so focused on doing right.
yeah. And I mean, if I'm right, so there was Judge Dredd. Then did Daylight or Copland come after that? I'm trying to remember the order they came in.
Copland was a year or two after.
Yeah, because Copland was the big kind of repudiation of the character he had built for the public, and to show people he could hang with the big boys, and he actually could, you know.
He could. The problem was that Copland, because it wasn't ever going to be a blockbuster,
Yeah.
Sylvester later said that it actually turned into another film that didn't perform so well at the box office. So although he got some kudos back, it actually accelerated the idea that he wasn't a movie star anymore. And in fact, within a couple of years of Copland and all that acclaim, he was doing direct to video,
Yeah.
which is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it was really, gosh, it wasn't really till what Expendables came out that he had a little bit of a renaissance.
Yeah, I think I'd say that would be it. Yeah, and also as well, I think he's always been an actor who's been very aware of himself. And I think realizing what he can and can't do, even in recent years, he's managed to rebrand himself. I mean, the fact that Tulsa King is wildly popular
Yeah.
and Stallone is probably earning a fortune from that. I mean, that's really impressive for the guy. And also, he is a senior citizen, let's be honest.
Oh yeah. He's what, nearly 80 now?
Exactly. So, by the way, folks, for those who think I don't sweat over these things, I am going to have to go through those scenes and edit out any accidental shots of Sly's junk because it is there. And for those of you who are interested, I know the future is a scary place, but back in the 90s, we had something called Planet Hollywood. Don't worry, you won't know of it now. It's obsolete. It went bankrupt in 99. I think three restaurants exist in the world. But
Uh,
at one point,
yeah.
Sly had those frozen dummies in fake ice. He had
Yeah.
some of those in the Planet Hollywoods. So if you wanted to eat some, I don't know, hamburgers and fries while staring at a semi-naked or mostly naked or completely naked, depending on the model, Sylvester Stallone, then that was your option.
Yeah. Planet Hollywood, man. That was.
That was when ego was unchecked.
Yeah. I mean, that was Stallone, Schwarzenegger, and Willis
Mm.
coming together, and each of the openings were big events.
Mm.
I mean, they got people out for them, and I vaguely remember the food was actually okay. It's just, yeah, such a weird thing to think that existed.
They tied the fortune of the restaurants in many ways to the fortunes of the actors.
Yeah.
And even though Willis obviously had the longer, because he was the star coming up, technically, he was part of the next wave of the less muscular but more attitude era heroes.
Yeah, he was kind of bridging that. He was kind of like the bridging factor more
Oh,
than anyone else, really. Oh,
now in the background of this shot, you might be able to see, sat right at the back, is Jack Black, who I have official confirmation of that Ross hates with a passion. Anyway, back to the screen. Something really bothers me about the font and this logo, the SAPD. Can you guess what it is, D?
it, it's an odd one, isn't it?
I'll give you a clue. That's a capital P, isn't it? That's a capital S, I believe. That's a capital O.
And a lowercase a.
And a lowercase a.
Oh,
Now, there are crimes in this society. Apparently, there's a crime for swearing. There's a crime for foul language. There's a crime for graffiti. What about the crime for incorrect font use? I'm disgusted.
man, I can't unsee that now. I can't.
You can't now. You'll see it in every single shot.
Yeah. You know, can we all take a moment to appreciate Bob Gunton, an actor who I always forget how much stuff he's been in. Like he was Captain Maxwell in Star Trek Next Generation, in the
Oh,
episode
gosh, yeah.
that gave us all of Miles O'Brien's trauma dump, basically, and inspired the next 15 years of Conveni's career, effectively. But also he was kind of like the kind of supporting actor in so much stuff. I mean, he's, if I remember right, he's the chief warden in Shawshank.
Yep.
But
What's the poster in the background there?
oh, that would have been Lethal Weapon 3, I believe.
It's crazy that they had this connection with one of the actors that was in the film, and then later on they have a poster of the movie. There's so many in jokes, and you can see as well. There's a lot of Warner Brothers stuff. There's even a Batman and a Joker in the background.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those great films. It's a decent action film, but it's also a very good comedy in its own right.
Mm.
And a lot of that goes to the fact that you do have these actors who are playing this frankly creepy ass world dead straight, and they make it believable.
They do.
You can kind of believe that Sandy Bullock would be that charming and kind of nerdy and happy to live in this society.
Well, we might as well talk
Yeah.
about that now, because I know this is something that most people are aware of, but she wasn't cast in this film originally. It was Laurie Petty. And Laurie Petty had rose to fame in Point Break. She was a year or two away from doing Tank Girl, which would be the perfect role for her. But also, as well, it showed that she was the sort of actress that liked to take risks. That she had a sharper edge. She was more rebellious as a person and an actress. And the reality was, she got on set. She wasn't helped by the fact that they made her buzz cut her hair, which, according to the producer, who was Joel Silver. Joel Silver, by the way, was a tyrant of a producer. He is the character that Tom Cruise is basically playing in Tropic Thunder. And he didn't like her look. He said some very derogatory things about her. But also, they filmed one scene, and it was clear to everyone that Laurie and Sly just did not work. They were just completely different characters. It was ruined. So they grabbed Sandra, who hadn't had that much experience at the time. And hopefully, I'm going to include a little snippet from an interview that she gave at the time. And she's so young, but so bright and bubbly. And I think her casting in this changed the film significantly. Like when they announced this at the time, I managed to find an old Variety interview, not interview, but a report stating that Laurie had been ousted and Sandra was in. And they even spoke to Joel about it. And the way he spoke about Bullock's part, it was a minor character. It was just like an extra character. That was it, nothing special. And yet you look at what this film has become, and a lot of the core of this film is based around her. In fact, I would argue she could be co-lead on this, if
I
not
mean,
lead, for the amount of impact she has.
yeah, I mean, I would actually say she is the lead more than
Yeah.
more than Spartan. It's Lena is the main character.
Mm.
She's the one who kind of has the most growth and
Yeah.
chance to actually become something better.
And she
So,
works so well with Benjamin Bratt. So
mm,
well. I mean, it's no surprise that they did Miss Congeniality, I don't know what, maybe 6, 7 years later.
about that, yeah.
And they were romantic interests. And it makes sense because at this point in the film, I genuinely thought that these two would be the romantic couple.
Yeah, I mean, they have a wonderful rapport with each other.
Mm. There's something deeply, deeply unnerving about the fact that these people are watching without action
Yeah,
somebody die. They don't do a single thing to help.
yeah. And the fact that these are the ones who are supposed to, in any other setting, these would be the ones who would be, you know, they'd be doing something right off the bat. But they've never, most of these officers haven't had to deal with this before. It's not in their experience. It's a really fascinating thing to consider.
I don't know if you ever realized, but the costume designer designed these uniforms with soft edges, soft fabrics, and with the whole idea that they were basically adults dressing almost like children because
Mm.
they didn't know how to be tough. And all these little things, all these little nods. And you mentioned as well about like our chief here. Is it, sorry, Bob Morton, isn't it?
Yeah, or
Okay.
Bob
Bob,
Gunter.
Bob Morton's from Terminator 2. That'd be one for the gag reel. But he's not playing a bad guy here. This
No.
is an actor who most people will know him, I think, from Shawshank because he was
Mm.
so memorable there. But he's not playing a bad guy. He's just playing a guy out of his depth. And yet, both he and Zachary Lamb here, both of them are old enough to remember the bad times, to remember the old world. It's an inconsistency that Stephen E. D'Souza, who was heavily involved in Judge Dredd years later, he tried to fix by going, look, just set this film 150 years in the future. That way you can get away with everything. It
Yeah.
raises so many questions like how is society all like this? Even if you fix the city, the next city along, well, if it was New York, they've still got crime. So they would just come over
Yeah.
and destroy this. You'd have to change the entire world.
Mm.
And the more you think about it, it's like, well, we never see outside the city. All the shots outside the city are matte paintings. Is this a weird, trippy version of a hive city? And it's all that's
Oh,
left. Is this almost like the paradise version of Mega City 1?
that's a real interesting idea.
That's it. Your brain could explode with the amount of crazy offshoots that could happen from this. It's nuts. Sorry, D. I've spoken way too much about this. I think I looked it too deeply into this film, and I've not been able to pull myself out.
No, it's a really good way to think. The funny thing is, I actually had read the novelization of this before I saw the film,
Oh wow.
because the novelization is kind of interesting. There's a couple of bits that get expanded on, and there's some scenes that you see kind of like the start of, but
Mm.
not the end of. So like, oh, my brain's gone.
Do you see what happens, for instance, to Zachary Lamb?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
The, that was what my brain was having a moment of. You do find out that Phoenix mortally wounds him,
Yeah.
and
That's not a spoiler, by the way, for folks watching now. It's never resolved. It's
Yeah,
never even hinted at. So don't
yeah.
worry about it, folks.
But Spartan finds him, and that kind of puts him on the track to find out where Phoenix has gotten to.
Mm.
But it's one of those odd things, and there's little bits of world building in the novelization that it's one of the things. Novelizations at the time were really good at doing those.
Yeah.
They the writers were normally working from earlier scripts or earlier cuts of the film, so they had a bit more information to play with, and and a bit more carte blanche to expand on the world than what they were necessarily going to see on the screen. So yeah, they weren't great fiction, but they were fun, and they were nice tie-ins. Still get a little bit today, but
Well, this film as well. This film started out as a pure action film.
hmm,
And then it was the writer of Heathers who came on board, Daniel Walters, and he almost completely rewrote the script to the point where he gets the first credit here. And he had changed it into this satire. Now, it wasn't ever meant to be bitingly political, it was just a gentle satire of the homogenization of life. And even afterwards, when stuff was rewritten or edited out or whatever, enough of that satire remained that that's kind of the reason why this film has become, I'd say, so well regarded nowadays. Because the elements of that satire that we see then have almost come true now. You know, this bland lifestyle, this over reliance on
hmm,
security, this the weird way of talking, and even little things like iPads and the reliance on digital, or in this case AI, to get the job done. It's a wonderful mix of stuff.
there is something very funny though about seeing these cops, and they are fairly kitted out. These guys,
Yeah.
they're wearing, like you say, there is a bit of the dress up aspect to it, but equally they're wearing costumes that are very well a little bit fascistic. Let's be honest,
Yes.
and yet they're completely clueless. And Phoenix is about to eat them for breakfast.
There's also a little nod as well to some of the aesthetics, and I've always found this the goons in the the top of the church at the end of Tim Burton's Batman.
Yes.
There's one guy who almost looks like it's the same actor. It's not. I mean, there's obviously a couple of
Mm,
years difference here, but it just feels so close. And there's these. You're right. They on one hand they look really tough and really quite evil, I guess. But
mm,
on the other hand, they're teddy bears. They just don't know what to do.
yeah, and it's especially funny as I mean, the whole point of Simon Phoenix before this is that he's not this sort of lethal hand-to-hand opponent. He's a mastermind, certainly. He's a
Yeah.
psycho. But this version of him is programmed. He doesn't even understand how he's doing a lot of this stuff,
No.
and he's just tearing them apart. They've given. I say they. We'll find out who they is shortly. But he's been given an, a skill set that should never be attached to someone of his actual genius.
Which in a way then means that he's a victim. If
Yeah.
he had been, he could have been rehabilitated. And I swear there is a universe somewhere where they made this film and
Mm.
he was released as the villain, but he had been rehabilitated
Ooh,
and
that's
sent
an
out. And then they sent out Stallone, who had been twisted, and he was the actual villain.
that's a really interesting idea. The
It's almost
role
like I
reverse.
think like things like Doom, where The
Mm,
Rock is kind of they spin the idea of the hero and the villain on its head, and
mm,
I like that. But yeah,
yeah.
I should also add as well, you got Rob Schneider in this film. So Rob was hired without a script. He was literally hired by Joel Silver. There was nothing written for him, and the whole plan, because he was only in on this set, he
Mm,
was literally there just to ad lib. And he only says a couple of things, but he lands each joke. It's useful, it's funny, it helps the film. And that is, again, that's Sly picked up on this. And again, it was something that unfortunately then went too far when it came to Judge Dredd.
Yeah, Schneider, I was mispronounce his name. Let's just say, much like Stallone in recent years, he's become a complicated figure to contemplate, to put it
Yep.
mildly. But in this era, he was he was good as a comic relief. But then they tried to turn him into a leading man in his own right, which didn't go so well.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we have the great late Nigel Hawthorne, a man who he had a nice run of American roles before he passed, which came far too late in his career. But man, did he ever get some juicy parts? Because
Oh, and we also have Glenn Shaddix as Associate
yep,
Bob. Now, Glenn Shaddix was eating good, and I'm sorry that it's not the way I meant it to sound, but he was eating good at the box office because in December of '93 he was in films rated 2 and 3 of the
ooh,
top box office. He was the voice of the mayor of Halloween Town in Nightmare Before
was
Christmas.
he?
And he was jumping back and forth from the set to do stuff on there. And the lovely thing I love about this is, so we used to, before the age of YouTube reaction videos and crappy top 10 fact lists, you
Hmm,
used to get websites by film fans who would just go and try and find these people and interview them. And I found this lost, really old website that had an
hmm.
interview with Glenn, and he was talking about his time on set. He and Nigel were friends up until Nigel passed, and he was still in contact with Nigel's partner when he passed. They were lifelong friends
Oh,
after this film. They got on so well.
that is delightful to know.
Uh, And and also Nigel, he had a great run, but he only did this film because he was desperate for them to cast him in The Madness of King George. And he'd done the
Ah,
stage play, but he
yeah.
was convinced that he wasn't big enough to get the movie. So he did this just to get that part,
Get it?
even though he didn't realize that like the producers were like, there's no way we're hiring anyone else but Nigel Hawthorne. So he did this, and of course you can imagine he's a classic British actor. So
Yeah.
he was very much a fish out of water here.
Hmm. Yeah. That's genuinely fascinating because I wasn't aware of that how things went.
Mm.
I mean, it makes sense from his perspective,
Mm.
but man,
Oh, there's
that
there's a couple of little Glenn Shaddix details and factoids that I'll drop later, but he has instantly become my favorite person in this entire film because of what he got up to behind the
I
scenes.
can't remember. Was he also Baron Harkonnen in the sci-fi TV series of Dune?
Oh, I don't know.
Hang on. Let me have a quick perusal of IMDb
Okay.
whilst we were watching Go Mad.
It is crazy to think though the time difference here. If you consider there was a very large earthquake in 2010.
Mm,
So there's no way that they would have been able to create this utopia before then. If they had, then it would have been destroyed by the quake. There's so many random elements to this time frame. It doesn't make any sense. And that's not poo-pooing on this.
hmm.
It's just it that would have been an easy fix. Just set it a little bit further forward in the future.
Well, he wasn't in Dune, but I'd completely forgotten. Glenn was actually in 3 episodes of Hercules: The Legendary Journeys.
Oh, there we go.
He played the Titan Typhon, father of monsters.
Note to
Which was,
self, I have to edit this scene because that was clearly Sly Stallone junk on display.
I mean, the man is clearly proud of the work he's put in.
Yes. Oh, well, I think there's something to be said for his attitude on this film because he was trying to be collaborative. The script
Hmm.
wasn't in any way, shape, or form finished, so there was the ability to ad lib, which like Wesley took full advantage of. A lot of Wesley's lines are ad libbed.
Yeah.
Sly was also, from what I've heard, he was like the perfect gentleman with Sandra. He was very, very protective of her. Again, if you see
Hmm.
any interviews from her at the time, I think that the hairdo and the uniform makes her seem a little bit older. But when you actually see interviews at the time, even after shooting, she looks shockingly young.
Yeah.
And of course, what you'll hear in a minute as well is the mention of John Spartan's family, which is one of the weirdest lost ends of this film because they mention that his wife has passed, which John had some awareness of, but they
Hmm.
also mention his daughter. The fact is, they cast the daughter. The daughter is
Yes.
in the movie,
Yeah. She's in for novelization as well.
yeah, and yet they've cut out any element mentioning her. She just appears 2 or 3 times, and she doesn't say anything. And I always feel bad for imagine you're an actress in Hollywood. You're seeking your big break,
Hmm.
and you get a role, and you're playing Stallone's daughter in a sci-fi film. And then it all gets cut out by like 2 scenes of you cowering as people fire guns above you. It's such a shame.
Yeah, because I remember the beat, how it reads in the novelization is actually really well done.
Mm.
So it's a bit of a shame. So
There's so many elements though that were cut out. There are fight scenes. In fact, Glenn was talking about this. Glenn and Nigel and I believe Sly and Wesley had 2 weeks to rehearse, which is really rare in Hollywood. Like
yeah,
at that point,
that's almost nothing, especially for
yeah. Well,
something
actually,
like
it was
it.
the other way. For an action blockbuster at the time, it was actually a lot because they were just
Oh,
talking lines. It wasn't action or stunt prep. It was
oh,
just
okay.
them talking over. And when they started shooting, Nigel and Glenn had such a relaxed manner with each other
Hmm.
that the editor came to them towards the end of the shoot and said, "I am so sorry, but we've had to chop out most of your stuff, and it's not our fault. But you've almost done the Alan Rickman thing. You two are so good that it's making other people look bad. Like you're overshadowing
Hmm.
them because there's lots of sarcasm, lots of dry humor. I mean, remember, for those who don't know, Nigel Hawthorne was part of a comedy in the UK
Yep.
called
Yep.
Yes Minister and then Yes Prime Minister. And imagine, folks, a comedy about politics that isn't political and yet still lands almost every punch.
Yep.
It's a thing that could not be made today, and yet it's genius.
And it still lands today as well.
By the way, by the way, was it 36 years in deep freeze? And they've still given him the same crisp packet. How is that justice? How is that justice?
I mean, clearly the facility haven't put enough budget into the what's the word? Rehabilitation outfits.
Yes. I do think the I'm just going to call him the warden from now on. I know he's not, but I'll just stumble over his name. I know I will. So let's call him the chief actually. The
Yeah.
chief is old enough to remember the time before.
Yeah.
So him calling Spartan a caveman when he was probably in the service when Spartan was originally capturing Phoenix, it just seems a little bit jarring. I do like it that later on they give this guy a little bit more of a balanced view. Like he admits to Cocteau
Hmm.
that he's worried, that he's scared. As a lot of these actors do. They are
Yeah.
playing up the fact that they're super sensitive and they're super kind. But with that comes some modern day sensibilities that you don't get in society today. They're willing to be happy and kind and honest with each other. He doesn't like the fact that somebody touched his hand, which is very, very COVID, isn't it?
Yeah. This one does hit a little harder after after 2020, doesn't it? And especially the great toilet paper shortage.
Yes, yeah. And this myth of the seashells, which started with the writer just seeing some seashells at a friend's house and going, "Well, I can make that into a prop." And so they made that into a prop. And that's it. No one's ever explained it.
Yeah.
I like the idea that, and this is credit to Stallone, that in so many of the scenes in this film, let's face it, he's being sly. And he even admitted, by the way, he played himself in this film. It's the film that he just plays himself. But in this little interaction, Stallone, there's no ego in that interaction with Lamb.
Yeah.
I know it's really subtle, but that's him playing almost like the buddy buddy. I wish
Mm.
he'd done a buddy buddy with someone of that age. That could have been a real thing. But
Actually,
unlike
yeah.
Tango and Cash, where buddy buddies, but they were both ego driven, you see moments here where he's being sensitive, where he's being funny. He nails the comedy here, by the way. He really does.
Oh, yeah. Well, the thing is, we only ever start to see Spartan as the obsessed super cop,
Mm,
but there had to be a reason he was that good to track Phoenix down in the first place.
yeah,
And we do see bits of that in this, where he's not just, like the chief says, the caveman. He is actually he he's actually a he does think a little bit,
yeah,
much more than you expect in this sort of thing, which is kind of funny because it does play into Tango and Cash bit because Stallone's role in that he is playing the more intellectual of the two, which is at the time was a bit against type for him as well.
yeah. Well, at this point in his career as well, apparently, according to the rest of the cast, he was getting heavily into golf. Something again which would come to bite him in the ass with Judge Dredd. But he was also trying to portray himself as this artist. There was this increased interest in fine art and modern art, and a lot of that stuff would show up in the films. It leads to a very interesting issue that we'll see in literally 5 minutes that ended up causing him a lot of financial cost and legal issues. But he's trying to show different facets of himself. As we said in the introduction, ladies and gents, the fact is that the days of Stallone and Schwarzenegger just being muscly, just honking guns, and having nothing else to say, that was coming to an end.
Mm.
This film and Last Action Hero came out the same year. They both cost about the same. They both made about the same. But Last Action Hero had huge expectations, didn't quite meet them, obviously,
Mm.
and was therefore viewed as a flop. Stallone was coming off a poor run, so this was viewed as a success, even though there's barely any difference between them.
That's a very good point, actually. They
Hmm.
are they are two films that would make a fascinating double bill, I think.
By the way, is this old Games Workshop text, The Hall of Violence?
It does look a bit like it, doesn't it? Sort of thing you expect to see on like a Slayer album cover or a
Oh God, yeah.
Bolt Thrower or something.
One of the ways in which I think Bullock really took over is the interactions like this where she challenges, they have this banter, this backwards and forwards. She doesn't treat it like, oh, the man is being so powerful, he's being so heroic. She's treating Sly like an older brother.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting dynamic, and I wonder if that was the actress's choice, whether it was Sly's choice. Again, like I've seen photos of them, and there's clearly genuine affection, but in a really healthy way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things I do like about Spartan's character in this is that later on in the film, when things pick up and we get to see him do his thing, he's quite adamant in kind of pushing back against her excitement at, well, some excitement
Yeah,
because he might be a bit of a literally an old school soldier at the end of the day, but he isn't blind to the costs involved in that, and he doesn't want anyone else to feel that. So it's kind of a nice touch. I felt it added a little bit of texture that wasn't always there in some of these movies.
Okay. Right. This is a big thing now. So I'll try and run through this quickly. So Sly was really into his art at this point. He wanted a piece by an artist called Robert Longo to be in this museum. It was a critique on war. It was a sculpture that was a part samurai warrior, part heavily armed, evil distillation of weaponry.
Yeah.
So Longo was like, look, Longo was one of the biggest artists at the time. He said, okay, Sly, I'll tell you what, you can have like 3 casts of this sculpture. There's one rule though, you have to destroy them when you finish the film. And he's like, fine, we're going to blow it up anyway, so it's fine. He's like, great, okay, you can have it. Anyway, film comes out, well, film's being made, fine. A couple of years later, Robert Longo is making a Smalls film. That film is called Johnny Mnemonic. And he's one day, oh yes, that Johnny Mnemonic, that Robert Longo. And he's shipping it around various studios one day, and he gets off at the wrong floor in the production office. And he accidentally gets out. Oh, I think it's that in the background, right there. I think that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's it. So he gets out the wrong floor, accidentally finds himself on Sly Stallone's production office floor. And right in front of them is his sculpture. Sly hadn't destroyed all of them. He'd kept one. So Longo walked straight out there, got the lawyers involved, and went, right, sue his ass. They made Stallone not only destroy the thing, but they made them take the main bulk of the statue's presence out of this movie. So I think the only reason that you see it in the background there is because it's not being featured heavily. So when Sly comes up to the door here, and the door gets blown off its hinges, you'll see Sly sort of fall down in front of what looks like a statue base, and there's bits around him. That was meant to be that statue being blown up and the pieces around him. But because of the legal ruling, he wasn't able to keep it in the movie. And as Longo said at the time, he never got any funding for Johnny Mnemonic out of Sly Stallone, but he did earn some money still. And of course, I only realized that when I did my aborted documentary about Johnny Mnemonic. I had to go through this film frame by frame in that scene, just trying to look and reverse Google search for images of Robert Longo's art. It was a sad time. It really was.
Yeah, that's a funny little nugget, to be fair, and it kind of speaks to both Longo and Stallone's personalities, because you'd have thought they'd have come to an arrangement, but no, artist gonna artist, and well, Stallone gonna Stallone.
I love the fact that they trank someone in the head, some poor innocent.
It's just so blithely done as well.
Bullock has almost cyberpunk style glasses. Almost like steampunk, actually. The sort of the round lenses.
Yeah, the whole vibe they go for with PD and their uniforms, with those baseball caps and the circular lenses and all the glasses. It's a vibe.
Hall of Violence. They should have like a section of Games Workshop that's just called that, the Hall of Violence. It can be all the orcs.
Man,
there we go, and boom, there. You can see the axe behind him. That's part of Robert Longo's sculpture.
Huh.
Sorry, that's as much info as I'll give to this film, D. That's it. The rest of it's all yours. I'm done. I'm spent.
That is, and now the gunplay begins. You know what? Snipes, I mean, he really is just a force of nature in this film, isn't he?
Oh, he was given carte blanche to improv, so he was doing so much of his own stuff. And people forget as well, Wesley Snipes at the time was a serious actor.
Yeah,
he was doing stuff like Jungle Fever. He was doing stuff. He was one of Spike Lee's main guys. He had to be persuaded to do this action film. People now
Mm.
look at him and just think, "Oh, brainless action hero." No, he was the real deal.
Yeah. And I mean, he's one of those actors who the reason he was so good as Blade is that he had the acting chops to go with it. And the martial arts chops as well. It's weird. There was this point we lost a good decade or so of Snipes because of his legal issues, unfortunately.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah. And it's a shame because, man, when he's on his A game, the dude is on fire. And
Yeah.
this same sort of time he was doing his little run of movies with Woody Harrelson.
Yeah.
I think it was White Men Can't Jump, Money Train,
Yep.
especially, where those two just had so much chemistry as a duo. It's insane. But this brought Snipes to a lot of people's attention in a way that they hadn't thought of him before, because we knew he had the chops to do the dialogue. No one expected him to be able to do all of this action as well, and a
No.
lot of the fight stuff. I think it was him because
Well, here's the thing. So there's a couple of different reports. The main one was Dennis Leary, who said that there were two main problems. The first was a genuine one. His moves, because he's a genuine martial artist, he was too quick.
yes,
And when you're doing fight scenes in Hollywood, you have to slow it down because the camera has to see it. Remember, this is film.
yes,
So the problem was he was having to relearn his stuff and throw punches and kicks slower.
yeah,
But what Dennis Leary said, and he did a couple of these, and of course he's very frank. He always has been about his roles. He calls this a massive pile of excrement. But he said that they would film all the stuff with Wesley. Sorry, with Wesley. But then when Wesley left the set, they would then reshoot all the stuff with his stunt doubles. And I'm imagining that a lot of that is probably not due to Wesley's skills. He's fantastically skilled. He's a genuinely great martial artist. But the fact that he was so fast, so quick,
yeah. Just to get some shots in that were filmed better.
you do see that at times. And again, that's not a knock against the guy.
I can understand that.
That's a nice car.
Yeah,
I love that Bob has a handbag that's basically just a watch.
I can never be sure if it was supposed to be a bag or a gong, to be honest.
It's a
I thought,
gong.
yeah. Oh,
Now, Bob doesn't get shot here. Now, that was maybe an oversight in the script, but later on, Glenn would actually figure out a way to keep his character alive when the script actually demanded that he be killed.
mm,
Again, Glenn was one of the big winners out of this film. But it is a really interesting meeting of the world. It's like I know this is very off topic, but it's like Kevin Smith talking about A Day on Dogma, where he was walking back and he saw Jason Mewes sat there talking with Alan Rickman. And he was like, what in the world can these guys have to talk about? And at the end, at the end of the day, he went over to Alan. He's like, look, I'm really sorry about Jason. If he's causing you hassle, And he was like, don't. He said something like, he is the quintessential American or something like that.
mm.
And Jason has never forgotten that. And he always shows off to Kevin Smith. He was like, yeah, Alan Rickman said this about me. But the idea that you have Hawthorne and Snipes together, it was an action buddy film that no one saw coming. He does have a lovely costume as well.
Really does.
It's so pompous, but it's brilliant.
And again, he's another character who, because this is only like 36 years past, it's hard to imagine he wouldn't know what whacking someone would mean.
Oh, exactly. That's the thing.
Talking to
He
is such a construction of. Oh God, I love how Leno gets all these idioms wrong. It's great.
And she's so happy. Like both of them. Look at Ben as well. He's like, "Oh, this is good information." They just feel happy that they've learned something today. They're the league. They're like the police equivalent of golden retrievers.
Mm. And I love that Hawthorne's good enough to realise, oh, I may have overstepped slightly here, haven't I?
Yeah.
Without giving it all away.
And he covers himself. He just does enough to get away with it.
Mm.
And look how pleased as well the chief is. Look how relieved. Again, he does shout people out, but he's there and he's admitting he's worried about the consequences of this. He's relieved to hear that they're getting a reward. And of course, he's you can tell he's partially jealous that he is not going to Taco Bell.
That's one bit of this film that doesn't really hit for people outside of America, because until about, I think, a decade ago, I had never had Taco Bell before because there weren't any in the UK.
So did you knew about the Pizza Hut deal,
Uh,
did you? Or did you not? Because this is
Vaguely.
somebody made a really good point about this, and I have to admit it was one of those cheeky YouTube videos. But so for the UK cut, and I think a few other countries, because Taco Bell wasn't over here at the time, they replaced everything with Pizza Hut, and they redubbed some lines and
I
they
had
put in
forgotten
some
that bit.
graphics. So technically, and I love the way that this was phrased, there are two. This film takes place in two different dimensions. One where Taco Bell won and one where Pizza Hut won.
That's
It was a fascinating way as well of
mm,
doing product placement because it's right in your face, but it's played for laughs. And they don't actually push Taco Bell as a great place. It's just the
no,
survivor.
yeah.
So, and for those
It's
who are interested, no, McDonald's and Burger King were not interested in being in the movie.
it is also funny on that score that those two definitely didn't survive when you have to imagine they were.
If you imagine any franchise wars, you can imagine that McDonald's wouldn't even bother fighting. They're just too big for that sort of thing. They would just wait for whoever was left when the rest of them scrapped it out and then just annihilate them. There is no world in which McDonald's does not win the franchise wars.
Yeah,
Unless there was a stalemate in the European colonies where Greg's just won out. Can I quickly say as well that this idea that I had about this being like a hive world or a hive city, a lot of it is helped by the fact that this film was shot in like corporate parks, business parks.
oh
That's
yeah.
why it is so sterile.
Mm,
It's something that we saw in RoboCop, where the main headquarters was a civic office. You use places like this, and you get this sort of overly manicured, not barren, but very, very corporate, sterile feel to everything. But because all of the backgrounds, you keep seeing them, these matte shots, these matte paintings, and it's pretty in the background, but it's also empty. It just makes you
mm.
think, what else is there in the world? What else is there in the world that this city can be this innocent and yet it has no other influences on it?
Yeah, the more you think about this world, it gets bleaker and bleaker because, like you say, it's either
It it either doesn't make any sense at all, or you can imagine the reality. And if, like me, Dee, you've read a lot of 40K, then the only thing you can come up with is really nasty.
oh yeah, there is nothing left. It's just LA. That's really depressing,
But by the way, when I go to karaoke, I always sing the Jolly Green Giant song.
man. But so some of the jingles they used in this, there must have been quite a nice little payday for the ad companies that came up with them.
Oh god, yeah, absolutely. The waiters
Oh,
appear to have an entire flower bed on their arms.
it's a vibe, I'll give it that. And but they've distilled the fast food eatery to fine dining, and I don't like it. It's
Bob is just brilliant.
oh yeah, the idea of any restaurant with portions that small is yeah.
Portions that small, and apparently everything is champagne. I mean, again, where do they have the infrastructure? I know people at home are like, Adam, why are you analyzing this? It's like, these are the things that come up when you start doing a YouTube channel about films and you start delving into films and you go, how does this society work?
And when like you said, like like us, you've read so much 40K fiction and just sci-fi in general, because it gets real bleak, folks, real quick if you stop and think too much.
Well, also, as well, for a start, is any of this corpse starch?
Uh-huh.
Because we've got to ask the question. But also, if this society is paralyzed by the threat that Simon Phoenix presents, one guy, then why hasn't Edgar Friendly, with all of his guns, run rampant over this place? Why are they scared? Like, I don't get it.
Yeah,
Maybe it's Jack Black. Maybe Jack Black has done something wrong. By the way, did I mention that Ross hates Jack Black?
you hadn't.
Okay, good to know. Good to Well, anyway, glad we all know that now. Meanwhile, on screen, Sly is. This is one of those moments why I wonder if this is Sly playing Sly too much.
Hmm.
But it is very inconvenient for the character to self sabotage this badly. Like, I know he doesn't deal with authority well, but even Phoenix is better at manipulating a situation just to get what they want. And it does seem really odd of Sylvester to sabotage what could have been a really big assist to his investigations by just being rude. Meanwhile, we have this
Hmm.
weird. I d
Oh, the cameras that he's been seen on and off.
and the subtle biker who's literally stepped out of Mad Max. He's practically got like a Mel Gibson mullet.
He does, doesn't he? Okay, what is the instructor of his bikes as well? It, yep, there we go as well.
So there's a lot of I know I'm pointing out some gripes. It's honestly it's as well because I like so much of this movie. This movie is a huge comfort movie to me. I just
Oh
like
yeah.
watching it on, switching my brain off, love it. When you analyze it more closely, that's obviously when you pick out things.
Hmm.
The way this fight unfurls, there's something really quite sad about it in the fact the rich people begin to just enjoy watching, in their words, the savages fight.
Yeah.
They literally just become it's like an audience. It's like something out of, not Gladiator. What's uh, the TV version that
Spartacus.
Spartacus? There's an element of that where they're like, "Oh, yay! There we go." They start clapping. They start clapping in applause. And Dennis Leary, although, I have issues with Dennis Leary,
Hmm.
just because he's using the act of another person who was a much better comedian.
Hmm.
But the fact that they were just happy to cheer for Stallone and Bullock as well. She's
Hmm.
trying to flatter him, and Stallone's almost telling the audience here, look, I'm not action all the time. This isn't right.
Hmm.
He for a moment, John Spartan drops the anger and starts talking about morality, but because he didn't keep his mouth shut earlier, he's not going to get his point across.
Yeah, he's already informed their own prejudices
Yeah.
of him. And it's funny because my take was always the applause started when he kind of he trapped the bulk of the
Mm.
gang in a very non-violent way.
Yeah.
He only takes down what, 5 guys, 6
Yeah.
maybe,
Even
hand
that,
to hand.
and it's barely. He's more like just punching them and then moving on to the rest. He's
Yeah,
he's never taking it that seriously.
no. And the applause starts when he kind of disables the mass of them. We're using
Mm,
the the, the tent arrangement.
mm.
My brain's gone a bit floppy for a second there. But you're right. There is a bit of it that they are. She's because she's a cop. She's probably seen it from one angle, but everyone
Yeah,
else is cheering along. They're probably they are probably in some respects getting off on watching violence that they don't see every day.
yeah. Which and that's a very interesting choice of phrase as well, D, because Sandra admits her character has, in a sense, gotten off on this, which is
Mm.
why Sly then gets, or John Spartan, should I say, gets the offer of later in the evening, because she's enjoyed the seeing the physicality.
Yeah,
It's really odd that a society is that repressed. I mean, take it into 40K. God, we haven't linked films that we've watched to 40K in so long, but there's an element of both the Eldar and the Tau in this. The Eldar in terms of the repressive nature of like they're holding off on not feelings as such, but just elements of normal human behavior. And then like the Tau, there's this idea the greater good, but the greater good all depends on your own position. And for
mm.
some, it's it's far more convenient to be gracious and kind because you're in charge. And this, by the way, is what I mean about Wesley's character. Although he is trying to rackle Hawthorne a bit, or Cocteau, should I say, with trying to show him who's boss, show him that he can adapt. The reality is he's still twisting Cocteau to get what he wants. He's already figured a way out of his personal trap. He's just going to get somebody else to kill him.
Yeah,
But he just wants the doctor to believe that he is following his instructions and he is his puppet. He's
yeah,
doing just enough to get away with it.
yeah. And it's nicely done because Kokoto, he's so arrogant,
He is.
so assured in his own intellectual superiority
Yeah.
that he can't conceive that Phoenix at this point has already outfought him. He's planned so far ahead.
I gotta say the lighting here is lovely. That
Mm.
fireplace apparently did heat up the set so much that it was the sauna, because that's a practical effect. But this film was shot by Alex Thompson, who was the replacement cinematographer for Alien 3. He also did Cliffhanger,
Huh.
which is probably one of the reasons he was on here. And I had the pleasure of meeting him once. Very, very briefly, one morning in Pinewood, we were stood outside the Tomb Raider set. We were doing some stuff. The guys, some sparks were sorting some bits, and he walked past and he just went, "Morning, guys. Oh, what are you up to?" And he was just asking, and the rest of the crew basically blanked him because they didn't know who he was.
Huh.
And I have to admit, all I did was I just sort of walked up a little closer to him, went, "Morning, sir. Yeah, we're doing this." Talked about what we were doing, and he was like, "Keep it up, lads." And I was like, "Thank you very much, sir." I never went and shook his hand, which I'm
Mm.
always kind of pissed off I never did. But I was trying to keep it as respectful as possible. But the fact that I was able to have that little, you know, that little conversation, and this would have been like 2000.
Mm.
So he was doing a lot of work at the time. But yeah, it's beautiful. Little flame effect on the side of them as they're doing their scene.
Yeah.
Ah, lovely, lovely. And all the while, Hawthorne thinks he's completely powerful, and he's like, "No, you're screwed, mate."
Yep. And you can actually see the moment he really oversteps because you could imagine Phoenix is planning his own contingencies. He wasn't 100% sure if he would go through it or not.
Mm,
And then Cockatoo tells him, "Do your job."
yeah,
Treats him like an asset. Can't see that this is a guy who actually is not too far off his own level of thinking. They think in very similar ways, just from very different backgrounds. and it's a classic trope, have the big bad undermine himself, and the henchman takes him out and takes over. It's a classic bit of narrative, but it's just so well done with those two actors. It's great.
You know, one of the things that really sums up an American home in the 90s to me is a weird quilt stroke beach towel version of John F. Kennedy. I think every home had one. I just, I just, I just wonder. I would love to see the rest of Huxley's apartment to see if there's just more weird stuff.
It's a very specific blast of Americana.
The beads as well. The beads is a lovely touch. Like I think there's going to be very few people who even remember when they used to hang beads in doorways. That was like a 60s and 70s thing.
Yeah.
That Sly does have a little play at himself.
He does. I mean, this film does kind of poke holes in his normal character quite a lot. It's pretty fun in that regard.
Oh, when I mentioned earlier on as well that one of the writers, Daniel Walters, had rewritten this film almost completely as a satire. One of the things that he'd used as the basis was Woody Allen's Sleepers. And that makes perfect sense when you see this scene because this is almost a twist on some of the concept in that. And I think it was that the film Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Sex But Haven't Asked. I think there's a similar thing there with some, like, I don't know what they called it, maybe the Orgasmatron or something like that. But it was the first time somebody had really come up with a device like this. Now, poor old Sandra Bullock had to do this. I believe it was the first or second day on set. She had to film these flashy sequences. However, in the middle of these shots of a character that you know, and let's face it, the audience all think she's really, really sweet.
Mm.
They add in a couple of sections of, I think it's her chest. Really, really odd. It's
Yeah,
like it, and to this day, people talk about the fact that that's got to be a body double because it doesn't look like her. And yes, I know, folks, we shouldn't probably be focusing on this, but even at the time, people were like a bit weirded out. They were like, "Why have you suddenly had this massive shift in tone? There's no reason for any explicit nudity in this film. The only nudity was Sylvester Stallone. We've seen enough nudity. We don't want any more."
yeah, it does stand out quite a bit, in fairness.
And Bullock actually said this scene was a nightmare to film because it was just so embarrassing. The dialogue was so bad. I've just realized, by the way, the back of her head looks a little bit like the back of RoboCop's head, and I
Oh
can't
yeah.
unsee it now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Here's a question, and I don't want to gross out anyone listening, but they're talking about the sort of how this is a much better way and a safer way, and this is the way it is now.
Mm.
If you mentally have sex in the way that they are talking about, and your body does all the things that normally you do during sex, surely that is going to be far more of an inconvenience than having sex because you're fully clothed.
Yeah. That's mm, that could be embarrassing. Or yeah, yes, let's go with embarrassing. That's probably
Yeah. But you see what I mean? It's like it's one of those things as well that doesn't quite make sense. I do like the way that Sly, like he has been brushed off. His character has been brushed off, and he's walking away, and he's not trying to do too much of his sort of ego. Like, yeah, I can. He didn't go in and try and rewrite the scenes so that they do actually have a relationship this early in the
Mm.
film. It's a credit to him.
And it'd have been very easy to do that, in fairness.
Oh, he had the power to do all sorts. In fact, this was one of the things that riled up Hawthorne. So, because Glenn again was telling stories about this
Mm.
before they roll action, people like Nigel, the British system would often be quiet. They would be focused. They would contemplate. They would be ready to go. Sly, on the other hand, would talk right up until the moment they said action. And in fact, he would spend most of the time, and even Bullock said this as well, most of the time just talking about what he'd gotten up to the previous night and who he'd shagged. Because at this point he was just rampant, which again is another reason why it's quite surprising that
Hmm.
he was quite he was, to all intents and purposes, a perfect gentleman with his co-stars. But I think he was already realizing as well that you keep work and your personal life separate because that's
Hmm.
far less of a hassle. But yeah, it's amazing that he leans into more of the comedy stylings. And because a lot of this has been written by a good actor, a good writer in the form of the the Heathers guy, Daniel
Yeah.
Waters. He's able to then work with that and create a good performance. I should say as well, this is another odd thing. So that lady that briefly appeared, that I'm of the opinion that that is the body double that they used for Sandra. Because it does seem odd that they hire an actress for that role. By the way, she was a Penthouse pet, which is not a surprise. A lot of
Hmm.
these sort of models found their way into minor roles in 80s action films or
Yeah.
90s action films. But yeah, I do wonder if that's kind of what happened there. It's really odd though. You go from
Yeah.
sex to knitting to nudity to knitting. See, a Wallace and Gromit film would never have this.
That is funny though that he's knitted a sweater overnight. That's
And he has some satisfaction. It's like the guilt, but also the satisfaction.
hmm.
Oh, you notice how many times you see the doors of these cars open and the characters get inside them, but every time that they roll up somewhere, people open the doors for them. That's because this was a concept car, but it was a
Doors didn't
concept.
work.
The doors didn't work from the inside. So people had to open the doors. And I think later on they turn up at the police station and for no real reason, two random cops just open the sides of the car for them. But this, of course, this ties in, while Daniel Waters is doing all this satire and talking about all these elements of society that might come to pass. A lot of them have, and here we have self-driving vehicles and
Hmm.
ultra-safe vehicles and all types of body bags or pressure bags, or in this case, protective foam. And I mean, some of it is really, ahead of its time. But again, like the streets are quiet. Where's the population?
Yeah.
It's
If
so sanitized. Who's
it
looking
really
after
is.
the trees?
I mean, is there automation? Is there? I mean, this is just a city with almost no one on the streets. It's so weird.
I mean, trust me, if this was made now, people would actually mention another country. I'm not going to mention it here, but they would talk about the streets that are too clean, everything is too over the top, nobody's actually working. For all I know, this could be just a mass hallucination and everyone can be trapped into the matrix. And again, ties into elements that we talked about during our Dark City video, where, as the 90s wore on, there was a greater and greater concern that society was going one way, and it was actually working against the best interests of a lot of people.
Yeah, it's. I mean, this was. We weren't quite entering Millennium Fever yet, but it was starting to play on people's minds, to say the least. Uh,
Honestly,
yeah,
this place reminds. There's so many. I've worked in so many banks that have these types of interiors.
I know, right? I did some work one for 6 months for one of the research councils, and the main office building is just
Yeah,
the foyer is it's lovely, but you walk in and think, "Good lord, an architect really had too much time on their hands here, didn't they?"
I have just realised only whilst watching this right now, that you can see Cocteau's hand in the other chair in the background when they walk into this scene. The fact they thought to set that up, that's really clever. So when Stallone suddenly goes and walks over to him after seeing Bob's worried look, it's there is a reason why he'd be able to pick out where he is, because his hand was visible. There we go.
Yep, it is very nicely done, isn't it?
So if Nigel Hawthorne had been, let's say, 20 years younger,
Hmm.
I reckon he would have been in the running for Hans Gruber.
I mean, honestly, Hawthorne, I think, could have been he could have been sort of presence that Rickman was, Ronnie Cox had in his latter performances when he played. He hasn't exclusively played bad guys, because in his younger years, part of the reason he was so good as Dick Jones was because he'd played so many good guys in his younger career.
Yeah.
But you could kind of see Hawthorne being in the same sort of running for that sort of character type. But then we'd have probably lost out on him in Yes, Minister.
Mm.
Oh, such a great fall there by Glenn.
He's eating up the screen. The moment I realized that he was the mayor in Halloween Town, I was so chuffed. So just to make you guys aware, I will put a link to it in the show notes. So while researching this film, I found an interview that Glenn had made to this small website. There's no advertising on it. It was an old WordPress site. The guys just went and interviewed small people involved with small productions. It's the sort of site that doesn't exist nowadays because it's so homogenized, and stars don't go on small shows anymore. They go on hot ones and eat, spicy
Yeah.
food. It was a different time, even though it wasn't that long ago. So the fact that Glenn was able to talk so freely and clearly was very happy to, and it's just this random website that maybe 100 people or so know even it still exists, but there's a treasure trove of stuff on there. Like they've got people from Nightbreed talking about Nightbreed on there,
Oh.
which is absolutely a film that we're going to probably do in the future. Absolutely, probably being as about as definitive as I can get on any subject at the moment.
God, I love that pout
Yes.
Stallone gives Spartan there. It's
Am
it
I
just
am I allowed to say something a little? Because I don't like. I think I've been quite good when talking about Sandra. I mean, her character is so wholesome.
yeah.
It's why I find the sex scene funny, but also deeply cringy.
Hmm.
But in terms of stylistic choices for the uniform, the black hot pants, it just confuses me. Because it looks fantastic on her, yes, but it's not the sort of thing that it almost stands out as being almost a bit gratuitous. I don't know why. And I don't want to
Yeah.
say it's because she's got a great butt, because that makes me sound like a real dick, and I apologize for that, folks.
I mean,
But
sadly, this was
I mean, it was, let's face it, a film of its time.
yeah.
This, let's face it, we had a brief shot of a topless woman for no reason whatsoever.
Hmm.
So, it's the way it is. Good old teal and yellow.
Yeah.
And I'm really sorry, D, but you can still see those SAPD signs.
I know.
So, so a lot of people happily admitted that when they came out of this movie, they did actually go and get a burger because of this scene, they suddenly had a hankering for a beef burger.
I mean, they look like really good burgers.
And they've probably got more meat than most beef burgers that you get nowadays.
I mean, there is a satisfaction to a good burger when you've not had one for a while.
The only thing that doesn't make sense to me is he doesn't put any mustard on it. no ketchup, no nothing. That's just it. And it's just like, okay, that's fine, but come on, you need to drown that stuff in artificial flavors, just like we
Uh,
do nowadays.
I mean, I don't know. I sometimes enjoy just a straight burger just to enjoy the flavour. But I can be weird in that regard because if you let me go mad with a burger, I will go bonkers.
Oh, it's true. It's a dangerous thing.
Yeah, if there's a restaurant that lets you customize your burgers, God help you if I get in there.
Random bongos player. That's something I didn't realize before. And also as well, what looks like Liu Kang. Oh no, not Liu Kang, Raiden. Because of course they were trying to get different influences into this film. I don't know if you realize that
Mm,
before they settled on Wesley Snipes, and of course they asked Van Damme and Seagal, but Stallone's first choice was Jackie Chan.
I can
He
see
really,
that.
really wanted Jackie Chan, but Jackie Chan, it wasn't that he wasn't interested.
Mm,
He realized that his own audience were fixated on him being the good guy
yeah.
because
I mean,
he was genuinely at his peak,
oh
and
yeah,
he was a star that dwarfed any Western action heroes.
yeah. I mean, it's hard to get across just how big of a star Jackie Chan was in the 90s,
Yeah.
late 80s, and right through the 90s. Because I mean, not just film, music. He sold more records than a lot of Western artists ever have in the Asian markets
Mm.
by a hell of a degree. Uh, I mean, around this time was when City Hunter, I think, came out,
Yep.
which for us looking back at it is a bit of an odd. It's a Jackie Chan vehicle, but it's more than that because it is literally Jackie Chan and pretty much a who's who of Asian talent at that time
Yeah.
from across the spectrum. And yeah, he was box office gold out there, but didn't play villains until I think his first role is quite famous. He was one of the goons in Enter the Dragon,
Mm.
who I think he's the one who brutally stomps in the underground bunker complex.
He accidentally clocked him as well, which Jackie famously he was like, "Oh, I'm getting sympathy from Bruce Lee. Let me pretend to be a little bit more hurt than I was."
Yeah, but that's pretty much his only villainous role until well into the late 90s at most. I think he plays a bit of a scumbag in a film called I think it's Island of Fire,
Yeah, and
where he
wasn't there one as well called The Foreigner? Maybe he plays like an anti-hero or
yeah,
something.
The Foreigner's a much more recent film in that
Yeah.
regard. But for the most part, he was pretty much the hero in everything
Hmm.
through to early 2000s. And only times he
Well,
wasn't was
yeah.
normally if he was specifically writing a role for him as the bad guy.
Speaking of writing roles, Dennis Leary here, doing his best I stole Bill Hicks's whole routine, is just brought in to basically do a rehash of a large chunk of his most well-known rants at the time. So everything
That's
that
a good
Dennis
point.
says,
Yeah.
he's literally just brought in. Meanwhile, we have a politician, even though they joked about Arnold Schwarzenegger, we have Jesse the Body Ventura in the background.
Yep. Future governor of Minnesota and a man who never met a conspiracy he couldn't make plausible.
But he also apparently had a great discussion with Glenn, who
Hmm.
was an out and out, let's face it, out and out gay guy. They
Yeah.
had a long discussion about gays in the military. And
Hmm.
Glenn was talking about the fact that when he was speaking to Jesse, they had different points of view, but Jesse was articulate. They discussed a lot.
Hmm.
And in the end, they came to a bit of a mutual understanding that helped. I think Jesse even like referenced certain sentiments to it later in his career. So he comes across as a really good part of the show, even though he does so little. And there's an interview with Jesse and Stallone. He's interviewed, of by all people, by I think it's the WCW, and they talk about this huge fight scene that they never show. Again, it's one of the many
That's a good
cutscenes
point. Yeah, because
never shown.
that's really weird. Because at this point, Jesse Ventura is someone you hire because you want a big fight scene.
Yeah, I mean, Running Man was not far before this, and he'd been involved in that. You know, there's a lot of stuff riding on these guys. They bring them in, but they don't do anything with them. Right, really interesting here. When the guns start, look who Stallone saves. Give it a couple of seconds. Boom. See that? So for those who don't know, and I don't know if the screen capture will capture it all, but Stallone is grabbing onto what seems like a random woman. That is the person that was cast to play his daughter.
Oh,
She's in the film. She joined the lowlives, whatever you want to call them, the underground. Again, another nod to underhives and different classes of society, and just there's a lot of 40k in this film. I didn't realize how much there was. Obviously,
yeah.
very sanitized, but still. But yeah, this is. I mean, that's why you think, hang on a second, why is Sly holding on to this woman for so long? And she even gets
I,
a shot just after he left. It's because she was meant to be a important character in this film.
yeah, I actually remember the novelization. Her stuff is significant because she crops up here and right at the end of the film. It's so weird that they didn't include her because the
I think
fact
a lot of it was pacing.
yes, I would be fascinated to see an extended cut of this film with
Oh God, yeah.
all that stuff back in the fight scene with Jesse, the stuff with Spartan's daughter, all that stuff.
Well, also
But
as well, I mean, let's face it. At this point, I believe it's the point where Lamb is killed, or it's
yes,
around this point, isn't it?
yeah, because Lamb is kind of on the perimeter.
Yeah.
Because I think he came with him in the car. They don't show him get out of the car with them.
Oh, that it's just then. I'll tell you why. Because when he gets out the manhole cover, he's not got a gun out. But that scene started with him having a gun out. So I think
Yes,
that was
yeah.
when it happened. Sorry, normally we don't follow the film that closely. So I really hope people are watching along with us, because if not, then you just have to trust our audio goodness and our honesty that we are talking about things that genuinely happen in the film.
But it is one of those films though that you kind of can't help but talk about what's going on because there's so much to talk about it.
And there's so many questions you take from everything. So for instance, they just came out of a car showroom. Okay, where are the cars being made? If the cars are being made, then they're being made by regular line workers. Well, surely are there regular line workers in this city? They're in a tunnel. Okay, is the tunnel to a different city? If so, we've not seen it yet.
How's the tunnel being maintained? How after a major earthquake is this thing still? Because something like this tunnel, you don't build them quickly.
Yeah.
You don't repair them quickly. This film raises far too many questions if you think about it too long, which is a sign that we really are two big film geeks, isn't it?
Well, it's the beauty of this film is that
It is.
that this film manages to create also self-inflating tires again. I mean, things that were special effects at the time are almost reality now. But it created a world, even though it's deeply flawed, it created a world that we wanted to stay in. The fact they never did a sequel to this or any time is genuinely surprising. And I can't help but think that I think the original plan was Seagal to be I think Seagal was the hero and Van Damme was the bad guy. But again, like Van Damme didn't want to play a bad guy and Seagal didn't want to lose a fight. So it never happened. But if either of those two had been involved in this film, because of the amount of direct-to-video dross that they both did, I'm very surprised that if they had done this, I'd be very surprised that this wouldn't have been made as a cheap sequel.
Oh,
There wouldn't have
absolutely.
been a Demolition Man 2 and 3. And in fact, Sly as well. I'm surprised that he never went back to this because, again, it's so well regarded. Now, they have talked about doing sequels. They still are talking about doing
Really?
sequels. Yeah,
Wow.
or maybe just a remake. I'd imagine it's more a remake at this time.
I could see a remake. I mean, I could even see something that kind of got into the whole. Was
Like
it the the
how
bro-
did we get this point? How did we
yeah?
get to the so
How did
almost
how?
like a prequel, then a remake, then a sequel,
Mm,
so to speak.
maybe. Yeah.
That'd be
It's.
good.
I could see that. I mean, the film as it stands, I think a sequel would have to do something pretty special because it doesn't leave a lot of space really.
It doesn't.
Like, it's quite a compact film in its own right. I could part
Even though it suffers from the even though it suffers from the Judge Dredd ending, which
yes,
is
yes,
that
yeah.
theoretically a whole bunch of really bad clones, or in this case, prisoners, have been let loose. There's no way they've not been let loose. Everyone's cheering and being happy about the film being resolved and the bad guy being defeated. But he has let loose a bunch of criminals. So how are you going to fix that? By the way, I've just realized some of these designs look a little bit like Transformers animated.
They do, don't they?
I always like an excuse to get a shout out to Transformers animated.
It is kind of funny how these cars all have that.
And you
The
know what?
design of the
You know
vehicles
what?
is.
As soon as I think Transformer animated, sorry, D, but I've got to say this. As soon as I hear Transformers animated, I think about you and Mr. Andy Millman, aka Decade Andy, talking about Transformer toys.
I mean,
So
you can't
just for
shut
the
us up
hell
about
of
it, can
it,
you?
just for the hell of it, and why not do this in the middle of a recording? Because he will never listen to this. He will never. It doesn't matter if you do a recording with him. He will never listen to this. So we're going to put a link to a Moonbase 2 in the show notes for the sheer hell of it.
I think that's a good shout. I mean, I'm incredibly grateful to Andy for getting me on those because I think it was just a case of there was one show I just pinged him one week and said, If you need someone to natter with, I'm game."
Mm,
And he was happy to get me in to help out with mostly the retrospective episodes, which man, they've been fun to do. They
they
really have.
have. You've had to deal with so much dross.
I know.
In the recent shows.
I mean, the movies have had issues. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
But
Now here is the team up, the odd team up that never goes anywhere.
hmm,
Again, I think this is a victim of cutscenes, but nothing that occurs here in terms of they're all teaming up to do something. They never do anything. And I bet you that there's a scene where they talk about this. And again, the chief he's not just berating him like the typical 80s police chief. He's genuinely worried. He doesn't know what's going on.
yeah, he's
He's
not trying
concerned.
to. Yeah,
No, he's actually trying to be a chief.
he is a conscientious. He's not the hard ass chief. He's far from it. He's out of his depth. He even knows he's out of his depth to a lot of ways. But
Right, I'll let
ah,
you talk about Nigel here, and then I'm gonna wax lyrically about Glenn.
I just love that Nigel. He still has his reaction to when he gets whacked is delightful because he has not a clue. He still thinks he's completely in control at this point.
Mm.
It's wonderful. And I shall let you talk about Glenn now.
So Glenn read the script, and he's having a lovely time with Nigel, and Nigel is happy to be off this thing. But Glenn's a jobbing actor. He's done well for himself, but he's a jobbing actor. And so he sidles over to Joel Silver, and he goes, "You know what? It's such a shame, isn't it? The audience are going to be so gutted." And he was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, everyone loves Bob. By this point, the audience just adores him. He is going to be an audience favorite, and you're going to kill him. I mean, it's a brave thing, Joel. You know, you damage the film, you're going to make them feel bad. And Joel was like, maybe, yeah, you're right. Maybe we should keep him around. So Glenn managed to keep his character alive. That's why he's not killed here. He managed to get an extra month or so's pay out of it. I don't know if it was a month or 3 months. I think it was 3 because of like the speed at which things were shot and the order. But not only that, but at the time, and this is a very unique situation. Glenn mentioned it, but he was like changing the way that he was being represented as an actor. So he went from just getting a salary to being like having like being a corporation. You know, like some people do with certain jobs, they become a limited company.
Yeah.
So he was going through this at the time. So when he said to Joe, he said, like, you really should, keep me around. In fact, wouldn't it be even funnier if I never die? I just keep jumping between the different parties, which happens all the way through the rest of the bloody film. It's brilliant. But when Joel said, yeah, that's a good point, they technically rehired him under his independent company, his entity. And what they didn't realize at the time was that the way that things were billed, because you have a massive corporate system, like the people doing the paperwork and the numbers don't always know who they're paying or what. They're just told, this is this person, set up this thing, this is how it works, rubber stamp, move on. There's hundreds of actors, they don't know all of them. What ended up happening was he got paid under 2 different entities, his own self and his business account. Let's call it business account. So when they came to talk about earning royalties from the film, he earned royalties from the film for his performance as paid for himself. Yeah, he basically, sorry, I was stumbling over that, but that's what it boils down to. He gets double the royalties. And even he was saying, I think 10 years or so after this film came out, he said he's still the only actor from this film to get double royalties, and nobody ever figured it out. And the best thing of all, he has Joel Silver, a man who's incredibly arrogant, to thank for all of this. And Bob is just wonderful, and he just milks this for every scene. And this film came out, and apparently I think they re-released it. It's like it came out, and then it sort of ended quickly, but they decided to bring it back for a couple of weeks. And that was in December. And that was when Nightmare Before Christmas was out. So Nightmare was at 2, and the re-release of this was at 3. So Glenn ended the year with 2 and 3 in the top 10 films of that week on the American box office. It's not bad for a jobbing actor.
That's pretty decent. I mean, that's sort of John Ratzenberger territory.
Yeah. And I love the fact that he tweaks his role. So he goes to being am I allowed to say this? A simp for Cocteau. A cloying assistant, let's just say. And he does the same for Phoenix, but he adds just a little bit of evil. And then right at the end, he does the same thing for Edgar Friendly, but he adds a little bit of charm.
Yeah.
He's perfect. I want a sequel with just him.
Just Bob. Back in with a tail. Just Bob.
I keep forgetting as well. Was he called Corporate Bob? It's going to kill me now.
Corporate Associate Bob.
This is where the film does, he's called, Associate Bob. What a fantastic name. That'll be my next title in the bank. Mark my words. This is where the film becomes Judge Dredd, though. Because Judge Dredd ends with 60 or 70 clones waking up, whilst he battles his opposite self in a weird science facility. And the exact same thing's going on here. It's so weird. Again, I think Stallone honestly took the success of this and thought, I will make Judge Dredd this. And it was, when I said as well about how it was the director that pushed it in an 18 direction?
Yeah.
With this, it was always meant to be a bit more family friendly. But as you pointed out, and I want people to know this because during our conversation, I said it was always meant to be a PG film, and that's why they had a toy line for it. And you mentioned, well, there were more adult films that had toy lines. This film had a toy line.
Did it?
This film had action figures. And to make it even better, most of the action figures they used were repaints of the action figures, and I kid you not, from the New Adventures of He-Man. And you can find these figures online. They made
I
action
remember
figures
the Adventures of
of
He-Man
this
line,
line.
and I'm trying to imagine how that would have worked because. Sorry, my brain's short-circuiting here, trying to grasp that concept of.
They had, I think they had seven or eight figures. They had the car. The Stallone figure looks
Okay.
really weird. They didn't have a Lena Huxley figure, which is naturally a crying shame. But yeah, they did. So when you were saying as well that look at the time, Adam, they were making toys for more adult rated films, and I was like, no, they weren't. It was only PG. No, you're absolutely right because they made one for this, and this was
Yeah.
always going to be a 15 rated film, or at least roundabouts, because the amount of murder involved. I mean, we have an eyeball in the first couple of scenes.
Yeah.
So yeah, they did make toys. Now, admittedly, this was, I think it was MB Games or something that made the figures. But yeah, it was very, very weird.
Yeah. Action figures were weird in the 80s and early to mid 90s, though, because everyone. You basically had the three benchmarks. You had He-Man, you had Transformers, you had G.I. Joe. They were kind of like the three tent poles. Ninja Turtles and Real Ghostbusters came in later and kind of took the crown for a while, but you had those three were kind of like the real success stories.
Yeah.
And every property in some way tried. Well, you had Star Wars is its own unique case that will never be replicated. It stands quite singularly compared to everything else. But you had all these franchises that were trying to, all these films that they were trying to come up with ways to market it. I mean, you had Last Action Hero action figures. You had Terminator, Robocop, Aliens, Predator, Demolition Man. If I remember right, for Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves toy line was just reuses of Return of the Jedi molds almost entirely.
Oh, wow.
Friar Tuck is basically a Gamorrean guard's body.
Oh, I
And
need to seek those out.
and the village for the outlaws is the Ewok village playset. That's literally all it is. It's just been recolored. It's quite wonderful how they did that. But yeah,
Sorry, folks. This is the off topic that we normally get when it comes to the final showdown. Keep going,
and
though.
it's
Keep
a
going.
shame because this is a great one. It's actually a really good fight. But yeah, action figures and movies, they chased it so much, and none of them really hit the same.
No,
Not
they were.
really.
It was the law of diminishing returns because there were so many lines on sale. I think as
Yeah,
well that's one of the delusions that you'll hear people talk about when it comes to 80s and there were so many great toys. There might have been a lot of great toys, but the thing was most people couldn't afford them. And the
yeah.
reason that a lot of the lines failed is because there were like 16 lines, all trying to battle for people's attention. By the way, Stallone landed right next to an open crotch there. I mean, the guy, it's like full on display. It's crazy. I really hope that there wasn't a poor extra in there because it does look as though it was sort of plastic tub with a lid on it and they were just told to keep still. I never figured out, by the way, how Stallone managed to avoid this so quickly because he's on the ground. He would have been caught even quicker than Snipes. I suppose
I
this
mean,
is the Jean-Luc Picard way of avoiding contamination.
this is a combination of that and The Day After Tomorrow's outrunning the cold.
Yes.
great
Well,
death scene though.
it is, and they even have a callback to like the very, very first, fight where there's the heads up or I'll lose my head from Phoenix and I'll remember that.
Yeah,
So yeah, there's it's lovely. But remember, folks, remember those prisoners that were being defrosted, and Phoenix didn't need any help. They were already defrosting. So Phoenix killed everyone else because they were going to defrost anyway. They have now all defrosted. And apart from that really bad explosion effect, which is one of the
oh,
few bad explosions in the
oh.
film, I know,
That,
but
that's just, especially after the start of the film had such a great explosion, destroying that whole complex.
yeah.
Oh,
Look who stood right by Friendly. It will cut to him in a bit. Maybe a wide shot. Hopefully it does. But again, the captain, he doesn't know what to do. In fact, he almost, very much similar to Judge Dredd, he almost sort of goes to Stallone and goes, "Look, what do I do?" There you go. Stallone's on-screen daughter is right next to Friendly,
oh yeah.
which is, again, odd. And they've clearly as well cut out any interaction between her and him because he just walks off and does the thing with Huxley. And there he is, the man of the hour, Bob.
Man, he's so good at getting into just those slight changes.
There was one thing that Glenn said that really did touch me, actually.
Mm,
When it came to him dealing with Dennis, who he said, again, was lovely, lovely on
mm.
set. But they were talking about the scene, and he said to Dennis, "Look, I know I'm out of shape and stuff, and I know you're going to ad lib something, but can you not can you not do a fat joke?" And so
That's
that's
fair.
why Dennis Leary comes away with the line. I think it's, "Look, you've got to do something about your fashion. You look like a sofa." That was a really, really nice way of them avoiding doing a fat joke.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
again, for all that Dennis Leary is, tough and he speaks his mind and he's frank, it also shows you, there is a different side to these people. And when you're working
absolutely.
on a set, you have to get along.
Mm.
Otherwise, it's a miserable time.
The fat joke would have been easy one to go for,
Yeah.
and it's good. It's nice that they didn't go for that, and fair play to Leary for taking on board Glenn's request. Because
Yeah.
honestly, saying for hair, for kimono, you look like a couch. That's actually quite funny on its own regard. So
By the way, I don't know if you noticed, as one of the Wasteland scraps, they had a guy called Jack Black. Now, I don't know if you know this, but Ross really hates Jack Black.
I was not aware of that.
Okay. Anyway, moving on. So, what did you think of the film?
It's actually been a while since I've rewatched Demolition Man, and I'm glad to have rewatched it because man, I'd forgotten just how entertaining a film that is. But
Yeah.
also how if you think too much about the setting, it gets even darker than it actually when it's
Oh
presented.
God, it does. It does. And there, honestly, I've got. Uh, After we did our first couple of shows, I thought, look, I do need to get some notes down. I know
Mm.
some of this is saying facts for facts' sake, but people like that on these sort of
Yeah,
chats. And then we can go off on our own discussions, and people are happy with the balance. If I tell you, I have 25 pages of notes, and I
lordy.
have barely scratched the surface. But the thing is, there was so much involved in this film. There's so much that came out of it. We almost forgot that Rob Schneider had his
Yeah,
small moments, and that was it. There's all these little things that then went on to have impacts on other films. It's fascinating.
it genuinely is because it just how the film sits. The stuff you mentioned about how, because I hadn't really in my mind connected it to Judge Dredd in that way that Stallone took his experience on Demolition Man and tried to replicate it just on a much bigger scale for Dredd. And it's like, in retrospect, it's like, yeah, that checks out. You can look at it and think, yeah, that's for better or worse. I can see that.
Mm.
It it lends Dredd an extra layer, to be fair. which I quite like. But it does that.
Ooh. I'm sorry. You know what? Let's do another quick shout out. So I've just seen Ton Woodruff and Alec Guinness go by in the credits. Anyone who listened to our last show on Mortal Kombat will know that I gave a quick shout out to the Filmumentaries guy who currently has an interview with Alec Gillis at the moment on his site. Really, really good. Talking about all of the effects from this era. I'll put a link to that in the show notes as
Oh,
well.
fantastic.
He's not somebody I have that much to do with in
Hmm.
terms of a contact, but this is a case of shouting out someone who's trying to do the good fight of remembering the classic craftspeople who were involved in films of this time.
Can't say fair enough, can you? That's a
That's all
decent shout
good.
out there.
Yeah. And even get this. Demolition Man was recorded originally by the Police. It was on a tape
So
in the original writer's car, and the tape machine was broken, so he couldn't change over the tape. I don't know if it was album or single, but when he was writing this film, that was all he listened to because he had no choice. That song then went to, I think, Grace Kelly, who did a version of it. But when it came to the film, they went back to Sting, and by that point, the Police had split up. So that's why he ended up doing this version of the song, which then went back into the charts. But even then, even this one song at the end still has a journey to it. It has a series of lucky chances, coincidences, and just developments through the industry that mean that the original song then went through several iterations before the song that you hear at the end of this film. Fascinating.
Honestly, it genuinely is. It's always fun to learn little bits of nuggets like that, you know? I dig it.
It is. Maybe one day when they do the extended cut of Demolition Man, I can then add in all the other 23 and a half pages of facts that I didn't say here. But I will leave you with one. The production designer on this film was the production designer for Super Mario Brothers.
Oh, wow.
Proof that sometimes even a massive, colossal Hollywood failure doesn't stop you from getting more work.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think we're done. Do you have any other thoughts on the film before we say goodbye?
No, I think I'm pretty good on that score. This has been a real entertaining deep dive, though. Thanks for picking this one, dude.
Hey, no worries, no worries. And again, folks, if you're out there and you've got any other suggestions for us, put them in the YouTube comments. Just let us know. We're always happy to add other stuff to the list, and if we can fit it in, we'll do it. Hey folks, if you enjoyed the show, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We chat about new movies every fortnight. And if you're interested in hearing more from us, and if you like a bit of fantasy, 40k, or tabletop gaming, the links to our parent channel, the Fluff and Hammer podcast, are in the show notes.